The stories you're about to hear are ones that I grew up listening to over and over again. And I wanted to share this with you guys because I can't just keep it to myself. I believe that these testimonies will help to set you free and to know the Lord in a more intimate way, to know Him as your Savior, to know Him as the living God who's so active, a God of action, and a faithful God who loves us. So I wanted to share with you all the gift of my mother.
My name is Ruth, and this is my story. I grew up in the Bronx, New York City, or New York State. My parents are originally from Puerto Rico, and I grew up in a kind of like a pseudo-Catholic family, and we very rarely went to church, but I think my parents had a sense of some type of spirituality, and I guess they felt that they were raising us in a quote-unquote religious, non-religious home, but we weren't the typical Catholic abiding family. I think it was just all in name. I remember as I grew up, my mom and my older sister from her prior marriage believed in, which is very typical of Puerto Ricans to believe in, what was called SANTERIA, which is now a recognized religion. But I knew as a young child that there was something very dark and very wrong about this. But I had no choice, so I had to go with them. And we would go to what's called the centers, or centros in Spanish, and they would occur on Friday evenings. And it was set up sort of like a church. We had two rows, an aisle in the middle, and we had chairs on the right and chairs on the left, and you sat wherever you wanted to sit. And toward the front of the room, there would be what I call today mediums, where they would channel in these energies from what I call today demonic entities. But as a child, I thought it was godly, but at the same time, in my mind, I thought, how could this be godly if it was, first of all, very dark, no light, there were candles. So everything was done at night in the dark. And so people would sit up front and channel and call people from the audience, hey, you, stand up. I was sent to destroy your family, or I was sent to cause illness. So you were diagnosed in a spiritual sense, and I was going week after week until finally I was called, and I walked up to the front, and I was told that there were spirits that were sent out to destroy my future, my life. And I would hear it, but I would not receive it in my heart because I was just going along with the process. And then after that, there was a prescription that we had to follow, like take a bath in flowers for 3 nights, bathe in these alcohol and homemade concoctions to ward off these future pending curses, if you will. Again, I followed, but in my heart of hearts, I knew that there was something dark about this. But then I remember as a young child having this horrific, it wasn't a night terror, it was an actual experience because I wasn't asleep. Neither were my sister or my brother. And so what we saw collectively, to this day, I am the only one that remembers, right? That's odd. What we witnessed was sort of like some kind of ghost-like apparition coming up through the floor and rising all the way up where it touched the ceiling of our room. The 3 of us shared a room. I slept in a bunk bed with my sister, and my brother was still in a crib, and he was crying and screaming and thrashing his bottle across the crib rails. So I knew that he was experiencing something very, very fearful and very terrible. I was so afraid that I couldn't close my eyes. My whole room was lit up. My sister was panicking. And I remember my mom saying that she ran into our room because the 3 of us were crying, she said, hysterically. That's how I knew, wow, this was real. This was demonic because it wasn't godly. Things of God don't cause fear. They cause a calmness, and they cause a drawing to Him, not a terrifying, gut-wrenching fear. That was my first experience with demonic activity.